Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to CJ's channel, where today we're ranking Hollow Knight. In this series, I listen, analyse and rank all the brand new Hollow Knight Silksong soundtracks for the first ever time. These 53 tracks will be separated across 7 videos so I can properly explain the composition. Each episode, my favourite one will be selected to advance to the finals in a bonus video at the end, where I will then declare the GOAT Silksong OST. And this is episode 1. Here we are. The long-awaited, highly anticipated new Hollow Knight game is finally here, and with it a brand new ranking series. If you're new to the channel, welcome, it's great to have you here. My name is CJ, I'm a music expert that's been studying it for quite a while now, and I absolutely love analysing new music and composers. Speaking of composers, I've got to give a huge shout out to Christopher Larkin, who's an Australian artist known for his work on the original Hollow Knight game back in 2015, and was so good he was asked to compose the sequel too. I have just noticed, Chris has mentioned the other musicians that are part of these soundtracks, so shout out to these people as well. However, for simplicity reasons, I'll just refer to most things as Mr. Larkin's work, whose channel I've linked down in the description. Now without further ado, let's welcome the tier list. As you can see, we have our tiers of F, D, C, B, A, S, and a tier exclusive for the Final Progressors being S+. However, these are a little boring, so let's change them to for F. As per tradition for D, we have C tier is a solid listen, nothing too bad but nothing amazing. B tier is reserved when a melody is decent and you start subconsciously foot tapping or head bopping. A tier is for the great, where you want to listen to it on repeat but it doesn't quite make your main playlist, which is for the S tier tracks. And as I mentioned, the S+ tier will only be used at the end of each episode for my favourite original soundtrack. If you have any good suggestions to rename any of the tiers, please feel free to let me know in the comments, and if I like it enough, I will change it for part 2. By the way, if you want to use this tier list that yours truly took a few hours to make, the link will also be down in the description below. But with that quite long intro out of the way, let's listen, analyse and rank the Hollow Knight Silksong original soundtrack for the first ever time, starting with the title theme, Silksong. I am incredibly excited for this because it has been requested hundreds of times by you lot, so let's go. I know we're only 5 seconds in, but I'm already liking this. If you've watched any of my previous OST reactions before, you would know I love the harp, which is being played here with a pizzicato technique, meaning Christopher is plucking the strings using his fingers instead of a bow. And that makes it a bit more intimate and compelling. Chris really wants you to focus in on that texture, yet there's a subtle fragility to it. I don't know if that could reflect in-game, I mean I've never played Hollow Knight before, but maybe the character you play as is very nimble but delicate. This is such a beautiful melody. A gentle counterline gets introduced with more orchestral textures, or to be more technical, homophonic, which is when you have a clear melodic line that is accompanied with extra layers such as this piano based in A minor. Amazing key change there, shifting to the relative major of A minor, being C major. And to emphasise on this modal lift even more, Christopher doubles the BPM from about 80 to 160. Also, I adored those crystalline Celesta-style synths, or maybe it was even a glockenspiel in a really high register. In conclusion, this is a super interesting title theme. The harp became what is called an ostinato, which is the continuous repetition of a melodic phrase, in this case being the A minor and F major. The majority of title themes in video games are written in a 4/4 time signature, meaning 4 beats per measure, with each beat lasting for a quarter note in duration. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. This is written in a 3/4 signature, which works well with the other more classical textures used, and also avoids the happy and grand cliche of 4/4. The violins paired really well with that to build an unnerving yet majestic suspension, leaving me with more questions than answers and got me wanting more. Which I guess is what a title theme is for, so for that reason I'm going to place this in B tier. Of course, every track that we rank in this list is subjective, so if your personal opinion is different to mine, that is completely fine. However, one thing that's objective is the CJ's Discord being the best in the world. Look, I don't make the rules. I mean, I do, but shut up. Whoa, look at all the amazing badges you can earn, and whoa, look at all these CJS emojis and stickers, and whoa, look, it's Weezer CJS! I hate myself. Link in the description if you want to join it. Now it's time for our second track, Enter Pharloom. What does Pharloom mean? Pharloom is the location where Hollow Knight Silksongs take place. Oh, brilliant. That was useful. It means I need a pharmacy to get something for the emotional damage. It's a bad day to have eyes. Anyway, let's go. Whoa. Very powerful and motivating chordophones, which are just string instruments, by the way. It might be a bad day to have eyes, but it could be a very good day to have ears. Holy! This is what I'm talking about! The brass gets introduced to evoke a foreboding, ceremonial weight, only validated through the trumpets and cinematic atmosphere in the tremolo violins. This is obviously very contradicting to the title theme. What I suggested, it could portray the character who plays as potentially being fragile. However, this royal Pharloom is an imposing and monumental kingdom with an impenetrable force which only adds to the challenge you face as the player. Oh my! The full choir pinpoints on the descending keys from A minor to E, but in an Aeolian progression, which gives it a religious twist where you must have full commitment. You can't enter Pharloom with uncertainty or contemplation. Being half-hearted isn't good enough, which is clearly the mindset Christopher had for this track as well. Just to clarify, Aeolian progression basically means using the natural minor scale from the A chord, which is something used quite commonly in classical pieces. Gorgeous reintroduction of the harp that's arpeggiating in the same descending chords from before, and that synergizes with the vocal choir, reminding me a bit of Dies Irae. In fact, it might even be a motif from that, which is a Latin hymn written by Jan Kasprowicz. Sorry for keep pausing it, but something else to note is in the background. The type of harp used here is called the pedal, as opposed to the lever harp used in the Silksong title theme. The pedal used here is a lot more bold and flamboyant, both in its physical appearance, but also in its bass soundboard. Here comes the final drop. Bells! Yeah! The bells, brass, strings and Kabrovich motif all forged together in a final testament of pure terror. Nah! We get a time signature shift to 3/4 through my favourite instrument on the planet, being those glorious bells. But they were tubular bells, something that we heard in Once on a Lullaby from Risk of Rain, A Heart of Cold from Ultra Kill, and they only add to the lethal double strike of the A minor chord. Wow, what a finish! In conclusion, Christopher Larkin just showed us right there as to why he is an amazing composer. He used some choral writing with the double brass harmonies around the middle of the track to upgrade what was already a striking sequence to become so sacred and ceremonial. But that pedal harp in the higher octave section, meaning the notes doubled in frequency while still staying in the same letter, so for example C3 or 4 to C5, it develops a higher tension whilst picturing Pharloom as a deadly yet majestically beautiful palace. And the fact that this is just a theme of entering the Pharloom location really sets up the atmosphere for the game as a whole, which gets me super excited for the other 51 tracks coming up, as we've already hit our first S tier. Next up we have Moss Grotto. Will it live up to the same high expectations set by the last track? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's go. I'm pretty sure this is a glockenspiel, this time not synthesized, but it does have a slight reverberation, or to put it simply, similar to an echoey effect. And it's also played in the same motif. This is such a soothing use of chord progression. Every bar or two, we get a new texture introduced to the melody, starting with the glockenspiel, then the harp, and then it was the vibraphone and English horn. And now we have a violin. This is just wonderful. Whenever I've analysed an OST before, I've always associated one standout instrument or technique the composer has used. And I know we're only 2.5 tracks in, but so far I can already tell that Christopher Larkin adores the violin, as I think it's the only instrument that's been used in all the tracks thus far. Oh, actually, maybe the harp has as well, but at least the violin has been used more abundantly. Wow, the English horn sounds like an exotic flower blossoming through the thick green of trees and presumably moss on a warm summer's day. The way it alternated between the A2 and G2, like AAGG, AAGG, is referred to in the music industry as neighbour note oscillation. Here's what's called a counter melody. We have the main 3/4 line with alternating eighth notes before a new melody enters with the harp, creating a cross rhythm within the meter of 9 triplet notes. That was definitely a more complex use of a counter melody, so for educational purposes, simply it is when a new melody is introduced simultaneously with the primary one to add more depth. Oh, another string instrument of the cello. Finishing off with a celesta in the same A to G tonality. In conclusion, this is one of those songs where you just can't help but smile listening to it. There were some folk-like qualities in the call and response lines and the instrumentation which helped bring together a more personal character and connection between the listener and area in game. Every single note in every single instrument and every single bar felt like Christopher personally cherry-picked them with such precaution to ensure the atmosphere was fulfilled. And in my opinion, he absolutely nailed it on the head. From the strings to the woodwinds, it was amazing. So for this reason, I'll place it right in the middle in A tier. Our 4th track in this first episode is called Strive. Very enticing name. What are we striving towards? Let's go. I am already hooked with this violin, and also the lack of full chords on the piano, suggesting an urgency and that we're on a time limit. This progression is almost as simple as you can get it, yet it strikes my ears in all the right ways. This is called a straightforward scalar ascent, as the notes that are played are A, B, C, D, E, yet the violin is orchestrated with such vigorous force. Hang on, I need to give a special shout out to whoever played this. Lachlan Bramble, Emma Perkins and Belinda Gerlart. I definitely butchered that last name, so I do apologise, but it says here they all worked on the violin. But this to me evokes the Spanish Armada trying to take over the whole world, and this definitely does have the intensity of a boss fight. Oh, GG. Nah. Christopher Larkin, how are you doing this? Just 4 tracks in, you need to be nerfed. I was so right about the violin. He brings back the scalar ascent from earlier, but now with a daunting twist starting in E. Oh, let's add that to the collection of holes in my wall. You still had the 1, 2, 3 correlation after, but starting on a higher scale throws you off, maybe knocks you down a little bit, which is completely natural for a boss fight, before you are able to climb back up again, which literally embodies striving forward. And as if that wasn't enough, the brass merges to the foreground to exaggerate the urgent magnitude by making the strings even more powerful through doubling on the lower octaves. Round of applause for that. In conclusion, I know I've talked about it a lot already, but Strive showcased one of the greatest violin performances I have ever heard. In fact, I might even say it was the greatest I've ever heard in a gaming OST. I loved when they split into triplet eighth notes. It surged the melody into rhythmic carnage, literally to the point where it was like Chris saying, "You get a violin, you get a violin, everybody gets a violin." That's such a niche reference. Let me know in the comments if you got it. There was a real unique feel in this track, or at least in comparison to the previous 3. The tempo being so relentless through fast 8th and even sometimes 16th subdivisions prompted me of those movie scenes where you're running as the ground crumbles beneath you. I think the only negative was that it was too short, which in a way is a compliment within itself because I want to hear more of it. This track could not go anywhere but the top of S tier and is a very strong contender for making it to the finals. Now that we're about halfway through this video, normally at this point I'll do a little segment called Comment of the Week, where I shout out my favourite comment from my last video. However, because this is the first episode in the series, there's no last comment to go off. So we'll say, if you want to have a chance of getting that shout out and winning Comment of the Week for part 2 of the series, all you have to do is subscribe, which is very important by the way because I'm broke, and comment anything down below. That's not a joke by the way, I started boosting my Discord server a few weeks back and now I've got this email. In the meantime, I will say there's been a new YouTube feature introduced for small channels called Hype. So by swiping left here on the YouTube app on your phone, you can press Hype, which massively helps me out in the algorithm for absolutely no cost or negative for you. So if you are enjoying the video, I would truly appreciate it if you could do that. Thank you. Now with that self-promo out of the way, let's move on to Bone Bottom. Definitely an interesting name and I don't think I need to explain why. Now I'm just thinking about skeletons twerking. What is wrong with me? Silksong? More like Silk Fong.
Oh hell no, I'm out of here.
Bone Bottom, let's go. Back to the more atmospheric tracks with this luscious ambient pad and arpeggiating piano, which is when the notes or keys are played one at a time rather than in chords. Guess what's back? Of course, it's the vivacious violin. Except here, it has an element of melancholia to it. As well, with the piano 2-note chords, it has a very fast attack but slow release, leaving an isolated emptiness. If you've watched my Risk of Rain 2 ranking, you would know what attack and release mean. But if you haven't, you're missing out, but I forgive you and I'll quickly summarise it now. They are both in a group of 4 parameters called an envelope, the other 2 being decay and sustain, but we won't worry about them in this case. Firstly, attack is how quickly a texture hits its peak amplitude. So for example with a piano, that would typically be quite fast. However, with the release, that is how quickly a sound ends from releasing the key. Here Christopher holds onto the A minor key to drag out the note and therefore increase the release time. I think this could also be used to signify how you, the player, looks back in sorrow at the tragic aftermath of the previous boss battle. Yeah, I think this is an E minor and A minor chord being played simultaneously to create dissonance, meaning lack of harmony between the notes, which sounds a little harsh on the ears but backs up that point made previously about despair. It's as if the dias is deliberately blocking you from hearing a clean melody, telling you that you need more time for self-reflection to see if you are truly ready for the Bones Bottom. I ruined it. Oh my, such grace on the chord progression, transferring into the upper register, bringing a new life of harmonic clarity, as if the Lord has now forgiven you and presents an unfound beauty. Once again, I have to compliment the violin for this time using a technique called a swell, which is that quick crescendo and decrescendo, or louder and quieter that you can hear. And that wonderfully adds to the whole emotive soundscape by bringing a living, breathing quality to it, which us listeners can relate with more. This technique was pioneered by Baroque composers such as Johann Sebastian Bach, before later down the line being expanded upon to fit with the atmosphere used in this track by Christopher Larkin, such as Franz Schubert, and probably most famously, Claude Debussy. In conclusion, I am in awe of the versatility already shown in this OST and just how well they are produced. Almost always in the past, whenever I've listened to the first few tracks of a new OST on the channel, there's always been a couple things that I could pick out, maybe even a few things that I would have liked and maybe could be improved, but here, there is basically nothing. Particularly around the midpoint, there was a consistent use of the E minor 7 chord that was composed so cleverly. Just before, at about the minute mark, there were little fragmented hints of it, almost teasing you of the potential glory. But then the progression hits. The chord expresses its true colours with full extension, to the extent of it feeling like it was the glue to the melody. All the other layers were tied around it. Bone Bottom was super emotional from the very first note to the last, and exuded such a magical yet sorrow atmosphere that I absolutely adored. This is another A tier. Our penultimate track sticks to the bone related titles, being the Marrow, which was a weapon I quite enjoyed using in Terraria. Wait, what's that? Oh, no one cares. Well, I'm sure more people care about this OST. Let's go. Super fast 16th note drum rolls to build tension. Talk about a royal entry. A spine-chilling, pun intended, voicing enters with overwhelming villainous energy. This is intense and I'm not even playing the game. The singular voice upgrades to a choir, levitating the scales and upping the stakes of this arena. I can picture a dark master rising from the depths of hell, parting aside streams of lava like Moses in the Red Sea. But one thing that's really stood out to me so far is the sheer depth possessed by the kick drums, the one you use the pedal for. It's played roughly every bar, but sometimes delayed to give an unnerving immersion where you know it's going to hit but you just don't know exactly when, which keeps you on edge and on your toes. This is something I've noticed Christopher is so good at. He opens with a theme, which here is obviously very daunting and dangerous, really low and quiet and reverberant. But around the midpoint of the track, there's a new discovery and emotion introduced while still resonating with the past one. Like just there we heard a brighter violin enter in E, which is a subtle contrast to the other layers in D minor. Definitely enough to make you notice it, but not to the extent where it overthrows the whole perception and ambience. Oh wow. Stunning. I just need a moment to take this in. Now you might think this is another violin solo, and you'd be half right. This is actually a viola, which is another string instrument part of the same family, however it's much larger in size and deeper in pitch. That perfectly resembles the warmer tone and haunting context of the level or stage the Marrow is played in, and again it subtly contrasts to the layers before, even the violin, while still adding a new thick richness to the harmony. Oh, we've got some... oh, what's it called? Tavan throat singing, that was it. It's definitely one of the more rogue textual choices Larkin has made, but I believe it could be seen as a reminder for the potential dangers of this area, where the ground rumbles beneath you like an active volcano, but also for the royalty side of things, like what was established at the very start. In conclusion, of course, another banger. Silksong does not miss. I found this soundtrack really interesting, particularly with the choir. I think Christopher, or whoever the vocalists are, record a live sample, but then it's been edited with slight synthesizers and digital blurring to create a human-like voice, but with an artificial, otherworldly twist. And even though the Marrow on the surface might not have been the most exciting, being in the common time signature of 4/4, having a lower BPM of 60 with minimal percussion, all the layers were expertly and sublimely handcrafted to produce another A tier. However, this one was close to S. After back-to-back playlist-worthy tracks, let's see if that can continue with our final one for today being Bell Beast. As you saw in Enter Pharloom, I love bells, so as you can imagine, I have sky-high expectations going into this. Let's go. Instant destruction with the very first G minor violin note. I think A Support Zando could have been directed for this, which instructs the performer to play it with a stronger accent. This has got to be another boss battle, right? There's such authority in these brass stabs, it feels like an announcement of the beast arriving. They pierce through the melody as well, because Christopher has coupled it with a legato violin. Legato, by the way, is the Italian term for tied together, so there's no breaks in between the notes, and over time, that naturally drifts further back in the composition. Consequently, you notice it less and less, which makes way for the brass to become even more prominent. Here's the midpoint switch up to a tremolo mid-register. Wow, the melody bolsters as the octaves double, as if to say the boss, or whatever it is that you're fighting, reaches its final form. Similar to what Beethoven has used, or in more modern video games terms, airship levels from the Mario franchise. I've just realised something, and I'm quite disappointed at myself for mentioning it, but here, the scale shifts from 6 to 7. I still hate myself. In conclusion, this is the first proper nitpick I've had in 6 tracks so far, but I got clickbaited by the bells in the title. There was none. I guess you could say there were bell-like percussions in the brass when they were reverberated, but they don't count. I had high hopes, some clean and crispy chimes. There were some interesting modal shifts used across this track, for example the G Dorian, which is really similar to the Aeolian scale I mentioned in Enter Pharloom, but with an E natural rather than an E flat, and also the transformation from C minor to B flat major, which marks an element of surprise and doubt. I love how these syncopated accents were incorporated with a modern orchestral punch, which really confused me on what genre this is in. It was like a fantasy hybrid of gothic metallic waltz or something obscene like that. Finally, for the ranking, I'm honestly struggling. How is it the first episode and I'm already struggling? This has never happened before, which just proves the level in this OST so far is phenomenal. However, I've decided on another A tier, right smack bang in the middle of the 7 tracks listened, analysed and ranked thus far. And on that note, part 1 is complete. Almost. All we need to do now is move my favourite OST into the S plus tier, which progresses it into the finals. And that exclusive spot belongs to Strive. Genuinely, this has been the strongest first episode of an OST ranking in the year and a bit I've been doing these videos, and I cannot wait for the upcoming episodes. Speaking of which, part 2 will be out in about 2 weeks, which is roughly how I'm going to space these videos apart instead of doing them every week, as I have so many other exciting videos coming in the meantime, such as a vlog featuring a very famous YouTuber, finally completing Ultra Kill, and my biggest video ever, which took a whole week of recording, so subscribe as you will not want to miss any of them. But thank you for watching all the way to the end. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I have recording it. And for now, good night. This intro has technically been in the works for about 3 years. Look how many there are. And these are obviously just extras from, well, me being on the toilet. But none of these were wasted.